Hello, my name is Mike. Okay, welcome to my channel. Today we're talking about Seeking Sister Wives Season 4, Episode 8. And we start off with Brenda and Steve, and this is the morning after they had that tough conversation with the kids about adding another sister wife to their family. It was a restless night for Steve and Brenda because they don't know what to do anymore and they're confused. I'm not sure what they're confused about because the right decision is right in front of them is to choose Jaden, because at the end of the day, his relationship with Jaden is more important than just him wanting to have sex with some young, naive girl. They go outside because it's their last day on like their little family getaway, I guess you could call it, and they both end up hugging and going their separate ways. Then we get in the car with Brenda and Steve, and they start talking about the whole situation with Jaden and how they didn't expect it to go like that, and Jaden needs to watch what she says. And also how Brenda just isn't going to argue with a teenager because they're going to keep going in circles, and Steve adds on to that by saying there's questions and their concerns, but there's also about having respect. In my opinion, I believe Jaden was very respectful. She could have went with that conversation so many different ways, but she didn't. She was really just being open and honest about how she felt, and I felt like even if you disagree with that, don't need to receive it, because something I've personally learned is that because you don't agree with someone's feelings or you feel like it's wrong doesn't mean it invalidates how they feel. Anyways, basically Steve and Brenda don't know what to do, which is honestly so ridiculous to me, like I said, just because April may not want to do this in like the next 6 months. April just became legal to drink probably not that long ago. And of course, people grow and evolve, and I just don't think April is worth choosing over your daughter. That is just my opinion. But next we move on to the Davis family. It's the morning after the disgusting hot tub scene. Basically, Danielle and Nick had sex. But there's more craziness to this whole story. So Jennifer and April had slept in the separate bed, and April had ended up getting uncomfortable and going downstairs to sleep on the couch. So Jennifer had wanted to go to the bathroom. She ended up catching Nick. So they basically decided, you know what, let's have sex. Right after he just had sex with Danielle, luckily April did not have to see it or hear it. That was just so disgusting to me, not only for Nick but for Jennifer too, because this UTI just waiting to happen, and like Nick is just nasty. And there's no telling what Nick and Danielle probably did. There's also no telling what Jennifer and Nick probably did. So it's just like knowing that he's probably spreading some UTI around, it just bothers me, and like the fact that they allow it to happen. I doubt they're using condoms, so that just makes it even worse. But going to the confessional, Nick talks about how him being in a monogamous relationship, it can be hard to satisfy his sex drive. And it sounds like he's a sex addict, but it's not being addressed as that, it's just being addressed having a high sex drive. I feel like people who have a high sex drive can be in a monogamous relationship. They don't have to have sex with multiple people a day just to satisfy their sex drive. I don't think that's how people with high sex drives work. Plus, it may be out of habit for Nick just to have sex with multiple people a day. I'm not even sure if he's like in the mood. You know what? I don't really want to find out anymore. I don't want to learn about their sex lives anymore. I'm kind of just done with it, because the more they talk about it, the more grossed out I get. But anyways, they all go downstairs so his wives can cook breakfast for him. Nick is reading some book about life or the cycle of life. I don't know what he was talking about. But once they get done talking about that, Jennifer starts to feed him grapes. I threw up in my mouth because like, what is that? He's like this king who doesn't do anything. Like, I'll put it this way, it's how like a lot of people feel about Joe Biden. I feel like he gets so much praise but doesn't do anything. He just sits around. And I feel like that's what's going on with Nick. Like, he gets praise but he doesn't do anything. But anyways, all of them are aware that Danielle may not fully be wrapping her head around like what may be going on and how like this whole polygamy stuff works. I think that's reasonable, but I feel like if they would go for someone more in their age range, maybe it wouldn't be as difficult. But no one in their age range wants to do this. Like, this is ridiculous. I could wrap my head around Sidian and Tasha, maybe even Garrett and Danielle. I can't wrap my head around having sex all day long with different wives because of your supposed high sex drive that's really just a mask for a sex addiction. But like, I don't know, but I still just can't wrap my head around them. Next we go about the Danielle and Garrett. They're finally in the new house, and they tried calling Roberta last night but just wasn't working for them. So it's the next day, and Danielle and Garrett try calling Roberta, and this time it picks up. They're talking about how she finally sent her immigration papers so she can get a date and a time to pick up her visa and passport. They were hoping they were already be past this part of the process, but they're grateful it's finally just getting done so she can get closer and closer to coming to America. I think she's stalling because she's realizing that this isn't something she really wants to do, but she hasn't told Danielle and Garrett yet. They also talk about how they don't think Roberta understands how serious this is because of COVID restrictions. She only has a limited time to get over to the US. Plus, getting your visa and passport is just a difficult and long process already. Like I said earlier, I think she's stalling because she really doesn't want to do this. But while they're on the phone, Roberta does say that she's excited to go to the US and start having children. It's really weird that they're talking about babies because Roberta's not even here yet. It's also a language barrier, so I'm not sure how that would even really work because there's way more important things to worry about now instead of conceiving a child. This is a very weird situation to bring a child to, in my opinion, just because Roberta's not even to the US yet. Still a language barrier. And I don't know if they even had a conversation when it came down to religion and how they're gonna parent. I feel like there's just a way bigger conversation that needs to be had before they start trying to conceive a child. Anyways, they're both ready just for Roberta to come to the US. Next, move on to the Davis family, and their little weekend getaway trip is over, and when they're in their car going back home to drop Danielle off, people ask Danielle, what was your favorite part about the whole trip? And she says when they were cooking breakfast because she really enjoys listening to Nick and enjoys conversating and just spending time with all of them. Which I had to laugh because what was he even talking about? Like, maybe because I just think Nick is delusional, so I don't pay no mind to what he's saying anyways, but what was he even talking about to make you be so interested? And if you can't understand what he's talking about, then you obviously can't be that interested because you're confused. But you know, I'm not gonna go on a rant. Maybe she didn't know what he was talking about. There was more to this conversation than they cared to show on TV. And April adds on to that by saying she enjoys Nick's talking as well, and that's one of the main reasons why she stays in this relationship. And I don't know whether these women are just really dumb or Nick is just really smart, because it's not a valid reason to stay in a relationship with somebody, at least in my opinion. Because I feel like with the relationship with Nick, the negatives outweigh the positives, but everyone may not see their relationship like that, so who am I to say it should go like that? Or just because there's too many negatives for me doesn't mean there are too many negatives for her. But for anybody who just has a mind on their own, this would be too many negatives and just not enough positives coming out of this. But anyways, sorry I ranted about that. But Danielle talks about how from this weekend trip, she really learned that she's open to the idea of this whole polygamy thing. She's willing to accept the negatives and the positives. She is worried if a new person comes in, it'll change their dynamic, but she also trusts that they have good taste because she says they picked her. Still have the confidence, but from that statement, all I got is they're gonna just pick another naive young woman who really doesn't know what she wants in life to join this cult thing that Nick has going on. And on top of that, she speaks as like she's a part of the family, like they live together and all these things, but Danielle is like a trial run. Danielle is like one of those 14-day trials where through the whole 14 days you use it, you play around with it, and then like the second last day you see if you really want to keep it or not, and you make the decision whether you're gonna pay for it or not. Kind of like Danielle is. I don't mean to like compare her to a 14-day subscription, but my point was that it's not necessarily permanent. Something like a light bill would be. Like, you're always going to pay your light bill if you want lights, of course. Yeah, I'm sorry about that 14-day trial rant. Anyways, and in the confessional with Nick, Jennifer, and April, they talk about how they know Danielle. They have to take a little bit more time to introduce a fourth person just because she doesn't 100% seem on board with the whole idea, which 4 people is a lot of women to entertain and give them all what they're needing and looking for. It's already a lot to have to like emotionally support a whole nother person and be there for them. Well, I guess that's what the other wives did for, so Nick can just have sex with them and then throw them away to the wives. But I do also ask myself if April and Jennifer are bisexual. It's because I can't see a whole bunch of women being on board with sharing one man, sharing coochie juices, and throwing off their pH balance and risk catching a UTI. I just can't see them all being voluntary in that unless they gain something else out of it besides Nick. I don't know. I'm not gonna look too much into it because I no longer want to hear about their sex lives or anything else. I'm just gonna let them be. But next move on to Brenda and Steve, and Brenda and April are going to meet for coffee and talk about the whole date night situation and how they can just get better with communication. Before I even start talking about the whole like coffee thing, I wish Brenda would just realize that April is 21. She's expecting something out of April that April just cannot give. And plus, April doesn't deal with Steve to deal with Brenda. She deals with Steve because she wants to deal with Steve, and she just tolerates Brenda because she wants to be with Steve. I really don't know what Brenda even really wants out of April, to be completely honest. But anyways, I'm gonna go into the conversation. Brenda just ends up talking to April about how she wished that the communication was the same as her as is with Steve, and how they just need to have better communication so they can have a stronger relationship. And Brenda does admit she does get jealous of April's and Steve's relationship because she wishes she had the same thing. I didn't write down my notes. I don't know whether she was talking about with April or Steve, but if she was talking about with Steve, then I think that's a sign that the marriage just may be over. And also, who am I to tell somebody what their breaking point should be or when their marriage is over? I'm not gonna speak too much on it. But then in like a in-person confessional, April talks about how she's not good with communication, and even it was rough to communicate with Steve in the beginning, it's gotten better over time, and it looks like she's gonna have to do that same process with Brenda. Then one of the producers asks April, does she love Brenda? Not like in a loving way, but more so in like a caring friendship way, and April doesn't necessarily give a straight answer. Says that they're working, growing on their friendship, and hopefully they'll get to that point one day. I honestly don't think April cares that relationship with Brenda, and I've said this multiple times, so I'm no longer gonna rant about it. But while I do say that, I do think a part of April not answering that question straight is because she's not ready to be honest with herself about having to deal with Brenda if she wants to be with Steve. And I think right now she's been able to avoid it since we're still at the beginning stages of the relationship. I honestly do think that's what it is. But next move on to Danielle and Garrett, and they go out to dinner with Danielle's brother and Danielle's sister-in-law just to have a good night and catch up on some things. The conversation of Roberta had came up, and they talked about how they had talked to Roberta earlier that day. And also, Danielle's brother asked, when is she gonna come to the US? They were unsure because she's stalling, but Danielle's sister-in-law is aware that she may just be doing this for a green card. But Garrett doesn't think so because Roberta's a very generous person, and the two things can coexist in one world, believe it or not. And Danielle's brother is also concerned that once they have all these children with Roberta, Danielle is just gonna get pushed to the side, no longer be a priority, and it's kind of already that way, but Garrett is able to mask it in front of other people. And her brother asks a valid question, like who's going to be taking care of all these children, and I don't remember what Garrett said, but maybe he said like all of them or something like that. Beyond that, it'll probably just be Danielle and Roberta. But they overall just wish them the best and want Roberta to get here so they can play their happy little family. Lastly, we want to Marcus, Taryn, and India. Marcus is very nervous, but still very sad about his date with Janae, and Taryn is still okay with him going on this date. She wants him, find another subscriber for their family and just have a good time overall. Going to the date, we have an in-person confessional with Janae, and she's 35, I believe. We met Marcus 5 or 6 years ago, and she was bartending, and they just lost connection because she decided to move to Atlanta. But going to the actual date, they don't really have too much conversation before Marcus breaks the ice and telling Janae that he has a polygamous family. Janae is very upset about it because instead of being upfront about it over the phone, he dragged her all the way to Florida to tell her this, and Marcus swear that she would have never came, but she would have had that right not to come if she didn't want to. She said she never would have came if she knew that's what was going to happen and that's what he was going to tell her. I would never came either because that's something that a lot of people just cannot get down with, like sharing a man or sharing one person, like a whole bunch of other different people. Basically, Janae isn't down for the whole polygamy thing, and she hates how Marcus told her what she would have told her over the phone, but she just would have been upfront from the very beginning instead of dragging her all the way to Florida. But yeah, that was the end of the episode. I give it a good 7 out of 10. It was a pretty good episode in my opinion. Tell me what you think of the episode in the comments. Sorry if this video was super late. I was dealing with my life, and recording just kind of didn't happen as early as it probably would, and my video also last week was late. Next week I'm really gonna make a strive to make sure it's earlier so people won't have to wait forever. But yeah, tell me what you think in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe if you want, and bye.